Дорогие коллеги, друзья, наши любимые студенты, сегодня необычный день. В преддверии юбилея 95-летия Воронежского государственного университета у нас в гостях, с недавнего времени у себя дома находится замечательный человек, наш друг, профессор Беккер. И мы проведем сегодня очень важную церемонию вручения регалий, академических регалий почетного доктора Воронежского университета профессору Йоргу Беккеру. Но я хотел выразить очень большую благодарность доктору Таратухину. Это очень большой друг Воронежского университета. И ребята, которые работают и учатся на IT-факультетах, на факультете прикладной математики, механики, информатики, на факультете компьютерных наук, математическом, физическом факультетах, знают о компании SAP, знают о том, что доктор Таратухин очень многое делает для университета. Я вам лично благодарен, спасибо вам большое. Я благодарен за сегодняшнюю встречу представителю компании T-Systems, доктору Дербушеву. Спасибо вам большое за то, что вы делаете в университете, за функционирование лаборатории Т-Юни, за продвижение университета. Это очень важно. Уважаемые коллеги, я прочитаю очень небольшую речь для того, чтобы представить нашего уважаемого профессора Йорга Беккера. И поприветствовать нашего немецкого коллегу, профессора Йорга Беккера, которому ученый совет Воронежского университета присудил звание почетного доктора Воронежского государственного университета. Йорг Беккер – крупный и очень известный специалист в области бизнес-информатики. В сферу его интересов входит широкий круг вопросов по ключевым проблемам электронного бизнеса, компьютерного моделирования, процессам управления, электронного правительства и многие другие. У меня свежи в памяти воспоминания о его блестящей, просто блестящей лекции, которую он прочитал в Сколково для ректоров и руководителей российских вузов. Я прошел обучение по этой программе, и мы с большим удовольствием слушали профессора. Йорг Беккер получил блестящее академическое образование. Он изучал экономику в университете Мичигана и защитил диссертацию на тему «Архитектура компьютерной системы управления материальными потоками» в университете Землисар, Германия. Благодаря своим прекрасным деловым организационным качествам, неутомимой научной активности и неузурядным способностям профессор Беккер стремительно совершает профессиональную карьеру. В 90-х годах он научный сотрудник Института информатики университета Землисар. Затем профессор, заведующий кафедрой бизнес-информатики и информационного менеджмента в Институте экономики университета Мюнстера. В 1994 году он стал директором Института бизнес-информатики этого же университета и одновременно управляющим директором Европейского центра исследований по информационным системам. И, наконец, в 2008 году он занимает пост проректора по стратегическому планированию и контролю качества университета Мюнстера. Обладая немалым педагогическим даром, Йорг Беккер щедро делится своими богатыми знаниями с молодежью. У него много учеников, он читает лекции по всему миру. В университете Алабамы, нашем побратимском вузе, университете города Тарту, Эстония, Венской бизнес-школе, Высшей школе экономики, Москва, бизнес-школе Турку, Финляндия. Беккер принимает активное участие в работе многочисленных комитетов и ассоциаций, является редактором нескольких научных журналов. информационные системы управления электронным бизнесом, информационный менеджмент, бизнес-информатика и другие журналы. Сегодня он принял наше приглашение стать членом редакционного совета Вестника ВГУ. Он является членом Академии наук Северной Рейн-Вестфалии. Именно Йорг Беккер в мае этого года в Москве на форуме SAP дал официальный старт немецко-российскому проекту «Едупас». Я уверен, здесь находятся ребята, которые участвовали в этом проекте. Этот проект при поддержке компании SAP и T-Systems, в этом проекте приняли участие студенты Высшей школы экономики, Воронежского государственного университета и университета Мюнстера. Проекты подобного рода не только приносят дополнительные знания нашим студентам и прививают навыки работы в иноязычных коллективах, но и повышают международную репутацию Воронежского университета в академической среде. Сегодня будет подписан меморандум о дальнейшем сотрудничестве между нашим и Мюнстерским университетом, в рамках которого в ВГУ будет создана магистратура. Магистратура, поддерживаемая мировыми компаниями Esario, T-Systems, SAP, предполагающая взаимное признание дипломов. Это очень уже серьезно. Наши студенты смогут в течение 1-2 месяцев стажироваться в университете Мюнстера. Совсем недавно Воронежский государственный университет, на удивление всем, обогнав так называемые ведущие вузы, федеральные университеты, национальные исследовательские университеты, занял очень высокое, почетное место в международном рейтинге QS. На самом деле это очень значимо. Куда бы мы ни приезжали, и в Соединенных Штатах Америки нас приглашают на уровень губернаторский, на уровень президентов крупнейших университетов. В Китае, в Европе все отмечают то, что Воронежский университет вошел в международный рейтинг. В этом рейтинге одним из важнейших показателей, весомых, существенных показателей, является показатель академической репутации в мире. И я уверен, что вхождение университета в международный рейтинг, в этом есть немалая заслуга нашего друга, профессора Йорга Беккера. Уважаемые коллеги, а теперь переходим к официальной церемонии.
Dear Rector, dear good friend Professor Androwitsky, it's a very great honor for me to be here and to get that honor of being honorary doctor of your university. I hope it will even strengthen our cooperation that started so well this year, and I'm very happy and very proud to be at this very honorable university and to give this talk now to you. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. That's really nice to have such an audience to talk about some aspects of business informatics, of information systems, that really my heart beats for. I think I can tell you something that I'm really into today. So what you see there on this nice picture, that's the castle of the University of Münster. So that's where the administration of the university is located. And if you see at the left-hand wing, there is my office. Since I am not only a professor for information systems, but also, as Professor Andewitsky pointed out, Prorector for strategic planning and quality assurance at our university. So I can have two offices, one in the castle and one at the institute. So Professor Andewitsky pointed out that I come from the European Research Center for Information Systems, and there we try to combine aspects of business administration, of information law, and of computer science into the field of business informatics, of information systems. So how to build information systems for companies, including all these different aspects. And we have a strong relationship with partners in Europe, I must say in Greater Europe, because Brisbane, Australia, New York, Waikato, New Zealand, and Seoul are part of the European Center for Information Systems as well, but all the other ones are located in Europe. On the one hand side, we have business. On the other hand side, we have computer science, IT systems. And sometimes there is a gap between the two. So if you ask business people what they do, what they want to do, they tell you stories. It's like a novel. If you ask computer science people, IT people, how the world works, they talk in abbreviations, acronyms, and ones and zeros. And they do not really understand each other. So how to bridge that gap between business people and IT people? And a good means to bridge that gap is to have models. Models that are a little bit more formalized than just storytelling, and a little less formalized than a computer system. And the art is to find the right level of abstraction. Everybody would agree this is a model of a bull, at least as Picasso thought of it. And this is a model of a bull as well, as this and this. It's only one paint. But everybody would say, yes, that's a bull. That's not a mouse or a squirrel, it's a bull. It's an abstraction that is very abstract, on a very high level of abstraction, but still you recognize what it should be. And that's the art of modeling business processes, businesses as well. So why do we need business models, process models? There are many different reasons. For example, selection of an ERP system, model-based customizing of a system, introducing a workflow management system, or even simulation of the processes to find the best process. These are more application system-oriented aspects. There can be organizational aspects, as just documentation. There are shelves of files of documentation, how the business works right now, in classical files. But maybe a model, an IT-based model, maybe even better. Or process-oriented reorganization. business process management, business process re-engineering, benchmarking, certification. There can be different aspects why a model could be very helpful. And there's a way how to come from an as-is state to a to-be state. So we have to prepare that. Then we have to define a framework that is a model of a very abstract level. It's like an architecture of the company. Then that's the normal way, as-is modeling, to-be modeling, then the process-oriented reorganization of the firm, the implementation of the new business processes, and finally continuous process improvement, process management. Why preparation of modeling? There are so many different aspects how a model can be defined. So if you ask 5 modelers to make a model of the same piece of reality, you will end up with 5 different models. That's really bad. Because you have to have naming conventions. You have to define on which detail level you will have a model. You will have different object types, relationship types, model attributes, object attributes. So that's quite difficult how to come to a unified, not heterogeneous model. And if you look what has been done so far, people tend to model in very, very detail, to have connectors all over the place. And the problem is that if you see a model like this, it doesn't really help to be a means of communication between business people and IT people. Because the model itself, it's so complicated, although it is right, it's so complicated that it does not really help as being a means of communication. Therefore, so what you have to have, if you model in these classical ways of business process modeling, like with BPMN or with event-driven process chains, or with all these methods of modeling, you have to have some guidelines of modeling, how to come to good models. There are only a few rules how to model, like in EPC, what some of you learned, how to model an EPC process chain, event-driven process chain, but you can have a lot of recommendations how to come not only to a syntactical correct model, but to a semantically good model. And you have to have the guidelines of correctness, of relevance, of economic efficiency, of clarity, of comparability, and systematic design. But starting with the first one, it's already very, very difficult. What is a correct model? You cannot prove by some mathematical algorithms that a model is really right, that it represents the reality in a right way, in a correct way. Now then we could stop and end, and if you cannot prove that a model is right or wrong, that would be really bad. But there are some means. And therefore we have to look at some philosophy of science. There are some levels in philosophy of science. The first one is to ask about the ontological aspect. The question, is there a real world? Or does the world exist only in our imagination? And there are different philosophers who have different opinions about that. Some say, yes, there is a real world, and the others say, no, there isn't. All what we see, all what we feel is only part of our imagination. Second question is, the epistemological aspect. What is the correspondence between the world and our recognition? Even if we say there is a real world, the way we recognize reality can be quite different. So some people say that the epistemological realism, there is a recognition that is not dependent on the person who recognizes. And the others say, yes, there is a strong relationship between the people who recognize and what we can see. Third part is the question of aspect of true recognition. The fourth aspect is the origin of cognition, of knowledge. Is knowledge, is truth only what we can observe, what we can see, empiricism, or is there some truth that is only in our brain, in our thinking? So what we call rationalism. And the fifth aspect is the methodological aspect. How do we come to recognition, to truth? That can be on a deductive way. We observe something that is very general and then we draw our conclusions to specific cases, or inductive procedure model, that we see something very special and try to generalize it. And if we want to come to model in business process modeling procedure, then we have to have some assumptions about the philosophy of science aspect. Namely, we have to have this standpoint that there is a real world, but the recognition of the real world can be different. So now how to prove that a model is correct or not correct? I said we cannot really prove it mathematically, but, and I like very much a sentence of Kamler and Lawrenson, who are philosophers of language, who said, we want to recognize something as true if experts and well-meaning people agree on it in a discourse. So there has to be a discourse, they have to talk about it. And who has to talk about it? The experts, the ones who have knowledge, and the well-meaning people who want to come to an agreement. So it's a consensus-oriented way to find truth. And I think that's very important when you talk about right or wrong models. It's a consensus-oriented way of finding truth by agreement in a discourse of experts and well-meaning people. So if you look, how is the status right now concerning the guidelines of modeling? Just to take some problems that we face today in process modeling, business process modeling. There are a lot of naming conflicts. That means different people name the same thing they observe differently, which is bad. There quite often is no real structure in it. So I've seen many business process management projects where there was modeled like 1,000 different process models, but there was no structure at all in it. So they were kind of independent of each other, and nothing in life really is independent from another thing. The models had a high complexity, as I showed before. Very, very many of these functions and interrelationships between the functions and connectors and XOR and IOR and AND connectors. and nobody really could read the model except the one who has modeled it. And if you have so many different models, a correction of some defects that really always occur can be seen in afterwards, so if you have modeled all the things. So these guidelines of modeling are not really fulfilled. So to come to a structure, I propose to have at the very beginning, before you start modeling in detail, you have to have the idea what is a company for. And the purpose of a retail company or a manufacturing company or a bank or an insurance are really quite different. So what is the purpose of a retail company? From a functional point, it's to buy things, to store things and to present it to the customer, and to sell things. And if you go a little bit more into detail, then what does buying means? So it's the question of contracting, which goods, which merchandise a retailer wants to buy from the supplier. It's the order management, it's the goods received, the invoice auditing, and then the financial aspect of accounts payable. And on the selling side, it's marketing, it's selling, it's goods issue, bringing the goods to the customer, it's billing and accounts receivable, and in between we have the warehouse, the stock. So on the left-hand side, everything that is connected to the supplier. On the right-hand side, everything that is related to the customer. And in between there, we have the logistics, goods received, warehousing, and goods issue. And as the fundament, we have these administrative tasks, like general accounting, asset management, cost accounting, and human resources management. And in the roof, all the coordination, the management tasks that base on aggregated data, like controlling business intelligence and strategic planning. And even on the first level, you can have something like configuring this model, adapting this model to different kinds of business. Like, for example, if you have wholesale or the internet retailing, then the whole model holds true. If you have, like, going into a shop, into a department store or food store, then on the point of sale, all the functions of the right-hand side fall together at the point of sale. Or there can be different types of business, like the classical retail or wholesale business model, where there are processes between the client and the retail company on the one hand side, and the retail company and the supplier on the other hand side, and they're quite independent from each other. And in that case, the whole model holds true. If you have the third-party deal, for example, if you go to a furniture shop, you see a nice furniture and you buy it, but it is delivered directly from the supplier to your home, then we call it third-party deal, and the model is a little bit reduced because the logistics do not take place between the retailer and the client, but between the supplier and the client directly. And there's some specific kind which is called centralized settlement. We see it quite often in cooperatives or franchise companies, that in the middle there is the franchisor or the cooperative central office, and the client is now the retailer or the franchisee, and the supplier still exists. and the cooperative central office negotiate with the supplier about terms and conditions, about the goods that can be bought, and the retailer orders directly at the supplier, which delivers and sends the invoice and a copy on the invoice to the central office of the cooperative, who pays it and get the money from the retailer. So a quite specific kind of retailing, and still the model is more reduced. What you see on the very high level, think of the bull just with one drawing, that you can configure this model on the very high level. Now let's go to the next step. That's only the structure. That's only on the very high level to understand what a business is for. And there are frameworks for industry companies, for manufacturing companies, for banks, or for insurance companies as well. Then we go to the next level. And we define that every task on the highest level of our framework is a main process. That's a definition. Models or modeling always works with definitions, with settings. Nothing comes from heaven. This is a constructive way, a construction way of describing reality. So every model or every task of the framework is a main process. So we saw goods receipt on the framework. Now we see a very simple but sound model of the goods receipt, which we describe or which we say to be a main process. And every step of the main process is a detailed process. And all the steps on the main process level and on the detailed process level can be described somehow. And we are not formalized, again, on this level. It can be some text, some Word document, can be some picture, some decision table, some little video to explain what's going on there. So it's a very strict way of how to come to good models, starting with the framework, going to main processes, going to detailed processes, going to process building blocks. And everything you use to describe a process step is standardized again. So we have these four levels. It's standardized because you can use only specific words to describe the steps, namely a function and an object, to store an article, to print a bill, to write a bill. So it's always a function, an activity, and a business object. And everything that is described in our 100 models is described in this way, and you have a glossary, a manual, where all these expressions are laid down, and you can only use, when you add some process steps, these things that are in the manual. And each and every step will be annotated by some attributes for the questions. Who does it? How often is it done per day, per month, per year? Which IT system is used? So a lot of attributes that are added to each step of the process model. So if you have something like that, a very strict structure, a strong definition how every process step is being defined, then we do not have any naming conflicts anymore because we have this glossary. We have this structure in these defined 4 layers. The complexity is highly reduced, and there's almost no means to make mistakes, because it's predefined in like a reference model which holds true for some companies of a specific sector. So this retail model holds true for all, at least for most of the retailers. And a specific retail company, if it wants to come to its specific process models, just had to add some features or to delete some features or to change a little bit, but it has a good starting point to come to models. And we have done that with quite a few retail companies, and they really are very happy with that. And some of them have done process modeling before with only these syntactical, what I call syntactical business process modeling languages like PPMN or EPC. They have only a syntax, a function, an event, a connector, but no semantical content. Semantic meaning the business semantic. And coming up with such a reference model, you have much more semantics in the model and in the modeling language. So we have best practices, or at least good practices as a base. We have high flexibility. We have built a tool for that, which is completely web-based, and it gets much more transparent to the customer. That's the first part. The title of my talk is Processes and Data Revised. To have a new look on processes, have a new look on data, a new paradigm for process management and data warehouses. So let's come very briefly to the second aspect, the data aspect. And I want to focus especially on data warehouses. Data warehouses are in place everywhere now. We are already talking about the next step, big data, but most companies did not even, or are not even able to handle their normal data before they come to big data. So if you look at companies right now, there are quite a few of standard reports. I've seen a company where there was printed every day a 600-page print of what's going on in the warehouse. Nobody reads that. But it's just there. And sometimes we have the impression that the importance of people refers directly to the amount of paper they get on their desk every morning. I think that is not the future. So we have to come to a state where we have much less of this standard, needless reporting, and probably much more of this exception reporting.
It's me.
Much more of this exception reporting, to see quite early what's going on. If everything works smoothly, we do not have to have any report. But only if something is not as it should be, then we have to have information about that, and quite early. Okay, there is some standard and basic reports, like every company has to make a balance sheet every quarter and every year, but coming more and more to this exception report thing, that would be really nice. So, how to come to this? I like very much a model that Szyperski proposed, and he said there is some kind of objective need, objective information, which can be derived from the goal the strategy of a company. On the other hand side, if you ask the managers what kind of information they want, they tell you. Or they mean they tell you. Because they are able only to articulate a part of it. So whenever you do a project and asking managers what they want, and you realize that, then they ask, and that, where's that? And you say, you never said that. And they say, it was clear anyway. So they are not really able to articulate what they want. And then there is this information supply, this 600-page warehouse report. And they differ quite a bit. And depending on the company, they differ more or less. So what we see, the relevant and requested and delivered data is quite often only a part of what's going on in the company. So how nice would it be if the information supply would fit quite well to the objective information need, and the managers would be sure that this is the right information they need, and they would be able to articulate that. On PowerPoint, that's quite easy. In reality, it's much heavier. So what we see today, we see data warehouses. Normally, you have a fact, like sales, profit, profitability, return on investment, and they are formed by dimensions. So sales in a specific region, for a specific product group, for specific customers. And these dimensions are in a hierarchical way because you have the single customer, a customer group, and a bigger customer group, and you have an article group, and a merchandise group. So they are grouped somehow. And for each and every fact, you have your own table in your database. So one for sales, one for profit, one for turnover, one for return on investment, one for profitability of shelves, one for a warehouse turnover rate, one for, I don't know, many. If you ask people that deal with data warehouses, how many dimensions do you have and how many ratios do you have? They say thousands. And if you look at the data warehouses as they are presented right now, it's a big mess. And it can be so easy. It can be so easy. Namely, what we have on the one hand side are reference objects. By reference object, we mean an instantiation of a dimension, like a specific customer, a specific month, a specific supplier, a specific merchandise group, which is related to the dimension here, customer, region. And if you think of it, there are only few really different dimensions. I always tell it's 7. It's article, it's supplier, it's customer, it's personnel, it's time, it's location, and its value. So if it is dollar or ruble or is value or planned value. And looking at a lot of companies, we saw, yes, it is that. Sure, there is a hierarchy on articles, article group, merchandise group. There is a hierarchy on time. You have the hour, the day. Somebody did something wrong when defining the time. Because the day fits into the week, and the day fits into the month, and the quarter, and the year, but the week doesn't fit really into all the other ones. So somebody did something wrong when defining time. So we have to have two hierarchies: the hierarchy day and week, and the hierarchy day, month, quarter, year. And then we have the ratios. The ratios, what we call sales, profit, warehouse turnover, and so on and so forth. And we have combinations of ratios. There may be a functional, an algorithmic relationship between ratios. The profit is sales minus costs. That is an algorithm, very simple algorithm, but it is an algorithm. And there may be functional interdependencies that cannot be calculated. So if some merchandise is placed in a retail shop, in a food shop, it does have influence on the sales of this product, but there is no real algorithm. So to say, the placement of this merchandise to the power of 2 is some growing of sales. That doesn't work. So they are functional but not algorithmic interdependencies between ratios. And the relationship between a ratio and a reference object is defect. Reference objects can be in a hierarchy, as I turned out before, and so are the dimensions, and we can combine reference objects. Like to combine month, February 2013, merchandise group, meat, region, Voronezh area. The sales for the retailer are some 2 million rubles. SR for the dimension combination. And that's it. That's not only the model, but the way how to implement it. Also, if you put that in your database, you can put it directly into the database. You have 9 relations, 9 tables in your database, and that's your whole data warehouse system. And we really tried to do that with some mid-sized companies, and it works. And you do not have to have thousands of data marts and parts of the data warehouse. That's it. They are quite big tables, quite big relations, but it really works. So the idea is regarding on processes or on data. Make it as simple as somehow possible, but not simpler. So, I always tell my students, you do not have to learn everything. You mainly have to learn 3 things. First, to structure, like to structure a company. Second, to structure, for example, how to come from a framework to specific models. And third, to structure, like for example, for a data warehouse. And I think that's what information systems people or people who can communicate between business and IT systems are really strong in. Structuring some kind of object system to some IT system. Coming to the end, my conviction really for a researcher is, and I find that in the motto of a club of philosophers of the 16th century in Siena. So I've seen the seal ring, and actually I have this one because I'm so convinced of it, of this philosophers club of Siena. And it's printed in there, esse, scire, facere. Esse, to be, scire, to know, facere, to do. Esse, that means as a researcher, you have to have a standpoint. You have to burn for something. Something is really what you stand up for, and when you go to bed, you still think on it. Scire, it's always quite helpful if you know something about your subject. And facere, to do. Not only looking what's going on in the world and describing it somehow, but inventing new things. Coming up with new ideas and being part of the invention process. That's facere. And if you young guys take that, esse, scire, facere, and nothing else from the lecture today, that would be quite enough. Thank you very much for listening.
Дорогие друзья, пожалуйста, вопрос.
Вопрос состоит в следующем. Понятно, что моделирование процессов позволяет создавать очень много приложений, в том числе создавать эффективные системы управления предприятием. Но речь в этом случае идет о операционном менеджменте. Есть другие понятия, связанные с проектной деятельностью, с реализацией мероприятий, проектов, которые также являются составной частью управления бизнесом, предприятием. И вот процессы управления процессами проектными – это тоже операционные процессы. Вот их вы пытались моделировать. Вы моделировали процессы управления проектной деятельностью.
Thank you very much for the questions. It's quite often the case that you do not model the whole company, but only part of the company. But it has to be integrated in the whole structure. So what I would propose is to have a framework first for the whole company, and then you can go into detail more and more for specific parts, and being on a much higher level of other parts. So the project of coming to good models always starts, from my point of view, with the big picture, and then going into detail in different areas. And it's always a question, what is the purpose of the process modeling project? Is it for reason to have a model for a new information system, or to parameterize an ERP system like SAP, or to just have a documentation of the organizational processes that go on, so you have it for teaching purposes. So that's the first thing, to have a framework, and then to ask, why do I want to have process models? And depending on the process model topic, theme, for example, the attributes you want to add to the model differ quite a bit. So if you want to know how long it takes from an order coming in until the order is fulfilled, then time is important, and you should, during your process modeling process, ask how long do you need for a specific project. If you want to have only the structure, the time is not important. If you want to see which IT systems are affected by specific process steps, then you should have as an attribute the IT system used for a specific model. So depending on the topic of your process modeling project, the attributes differ and the level of abstraction, the hierarchy level, differs quite a bit.
Спасибо большое. Вопрос от ректора. Мы находимся в университете, и, к сожалению, российские университеты имеют меньше, по сравнению с западными университетами, меньше автономии. Мы более административно зависимы от министерства, от ведомств. И буквально ежедневно на нас спускается очень большой поток запрашиваемой информации. Это отчеты, различные меморандумы, различные справки, аналитические обзоры. В вашей лекции очень интересный раздел был посвященный актуальной, востребованной и запрашиваемой информации. Будучи проректором Мюнстерского университета, вы пытались создать оптимальную модель входящей информации, модель информационных потоков университета?
Yeah, we face quite the same problem in Germany as you do here, that a lot of information is needed by the governmental authorities, and therefore you have to have an integrated system to run the university as well, because otherwise you need a big group of people who are only responsible for reporting, and even the administration of a university, the main task is not reporting but is supporting research and teaching. And if you have an integrated information system, it helps a little bit. Like, for example, we have in Münster a research information system where we have for every person in the university all their publications, all their projects, all their patents, and all their prizes put into the database. So it's a very famous 5 Münster Ps: person, project, publication, prize, and patent. That helps communicating about it. And that helps us do some of the reporting to the ministry, because they always ask about a research report, and our research report is an extract of this research information database, which has many other purposes, like, for example, present what we do to the public, present it to funding authorities like the German Research Foundation or the Ministry of Research and Innovation. So this one database helps to report to very different authorities, because it is an integrated research information system. And I think that is something universities who think about their own IT system to have many of the data integrated, because nothing is independent of the other one. Research and teaching are dependent on each other. The whole financial area is somehow related to project, to people, to research that is going on to the facilities you have, to all the houses, the lecture halls and the bureaus. And everything is interdependent with everything. So to have an integrated information system really helps to support all this reporting, but still there's a lot of report going on, and sometimes you really can ask, it is necessary to have that. And there is even some more going on. We are coming to a standardized research data set in Germany for all universities. And it's an initiative of the universities, not of the ministry and not of some other legal authorities. It's of the universities itself. They want to standardize a data set to report on research, and we want to recommend it then to all the governmental authorities if they want to know something about the research that's going on, that they refer themselves to that standardized data set and do not ask anything else that could be of interest to somebody, but not really.
Спасибо. Коллеги, дорогие студенты, есть еще вопросы?
Есть.
Да.
Господин Беккер, вот в этом зале очень много студентов, и все они изучают математику, и я читаю математические курсы. Вот в связи с этим у меня вопрос такой. Каким математическим аппаратом вы пользуетесь при разработке моделей?
Maybe it's a little bit disappointing, but there's not so much mathematics in our model. Because what I think models have different purposes. What we want to do is describing processes from a only business-oriented level. But for example, it could be very helpful, for example, to have simulation of a model, especially in the manufacturing field. I've done it in my PhD thesis, that I did it for the administration field as well, and there can be some real good outcomes of it. But then you have to go a little bit further than the very simple models I proposed, but there is a quite easy transformation from these models to more detailed models, and they really need these connectors, these branches. On the one hand side, this branch, or the other branch, and these are then the models, for example, for simulation, or to go deeper into the realization of IT systems. And I think somewhere there is a manual bridge. For more than 30 years, information systems, business informatics people had the idea to describe business somehow, and then everything else is done somehow automatically. It didn't work, it hasn't been worked for many, many years, and somewhere there is a manual gap. And now with these new kinds of software engineering, where more and more of an IT system is not coded in lines of code, but by describing on a technical level in models, like UML. These are mostly technical models. There we have the total integration from the modeling language up down to the IT system, but on the very up level, for really describing business, I think these more semantical modeling languages are quite helpful, and maybe there is either an enrichment and enhancement of these business process models to come to more technical models, or there is a manual bridge. And we will see what the future brings if we can enhance this business model so they really can serve as technical models for simulation, for benchmarking, for building IT system, or if we have this bright guy who is able to form for specific areas than these more technical models.
Если разделить бизнес-сообщество условно на две группы, первая группа – это публичные компании, которые размещают свои акции на фондовых площадках, компании, которые продают свою продукцию на международных рынках. Пример такой компании, допустим, Новолипецкий металлургический комбинат. Мы с компанией Atos IT Solutions продвигали продукты SAP в Новолипецком металлургическом комбинате и встречали очень большую заинтересованность собственников, а следовательно и менеджмента, для того, чтобы занимались моделированием бизнес-процессов в этой компании. Но есть другая группа не публичных компаний, которые не раскрывают о себе всю информацию в отчетности и, в принципе, не столь активно занимаются моделированием бизнес-процессов. Вот на ваш взгляд, профессионалы и практика, есть ли какая-то зависимость между степенью публичности компании и мотивированностью собственников в построении вот таких моделей?
Yeah, the question is who is willing to share processes and to give a little bit of what he thinks his competitive advantage is to other companies. And there I think research comes into play. We as researchers, we have the possibility to look at different companies and to come up with generalized models that do not give very specific things, competitive advantages of a specific firm to the public, but have the possibility to come up with models on a more generalized level, on this bull level, that holds true for many companies, and so they have a good starting point to build their own models. And still they have to think, where could my competitive advantage be, and build it into that model. It's quite hard to find some companies, bring them together and say, now you share everything you do. They won't do that. And I totally agree with you that they will not do it. But we as researchers, we are not working for one specific company, but we work for research. We work for better knowledge to everybody. And if we can extract what holds true for many companies, then we can come up with these reference models that holds true for a sector and at the end help every company in that sector or in that area.
Но построение модели, на ваш взгляд, увеличивает риск для враждебного поглощения компаний? Если заинтересованные конкуренты будут знать бизнес-процессы, и они будут прозрачные, мне кажется, этот риск поглощения увеличивается. Увеличивает риск для враждебного поглощения компании. Если заинтересованные конкуренты будут знать бизнес-процессы, и они будут прозрачны, мне кажется, этот риск поглощения увеличивается.
I think no one company will really present the very detailed facts of what they do and what their competitive advantage is to the public. And when you go to as a researcher into companies and talk with them and try to come up with better processes, you normally have to sign some agreement that you will not give the very detailed competitive advantage processes to the whole public. So as a researcher, you have to be a little bit careful what to publish, what to bring to a general audience, and therefore when we publish such things, we always talk with the companies before and say, look, this is a very general model where for sure some of the experience we did with your companies goes into, but it's not your processes, it's a general process. Do you agree that we publish that or that we bring it to a generalized reference model? And so far we did not have any problem with that, and the companies didn't give up their competitive advantage. But you have to be careful. Yeah, if as a researcher you do not act with a lot of real scientific honor, then that might even be a risk for the firm. But no risk, no fun.
Thank you. Коллеги, есть еще вопросы?
Позвольте.
Да, пожалуйста.
У меня есть один вопрос, который я надеялся, что зададут студенты. Сегодня было оглашено, что стартует стажировка в Германии на 1-2 семестра, но почему-то никто не спросил, какой будет один из критериев для прохождения такой стажировки, для получения возможности такой стажировки. И у меня вопрос к Йоргу Беккеру. Будет ли одним из основных критериев для данной стажировки наличие научных статей? И сколько он считает необходимым иметь научных статей для успешного студента, для хорошего студента?
Очень хороший вопрос.
Я вот смотрю на наших студентов, но почему-то они молчат.
Students from here are very, very welcome to come to Münster, and I invite you to at least think about that. There are two very strict prerequisites. If you come to our bachelor studies, you have to speak German, and if you come to our master's level, you should be able to speak English, because our bachelor degree is mainly in German. There are some courses in English as well, but if you want to have more than one semester, you should speak German. Otherwise, in your master's level, it's totally in English. But if you come to Münster as a bachelor student with good English knowledge and no German knowledge, we find courses. So even in the bachelor degree, we can provide at least courses for one semester in English as well. But I learned that some of you are quite able to speak German as well, so you are invited to do that. And we have a specific portion in our admission level that is for international students. And if you come for 1 or 2 semesters, there's even no restriction on the number of students that can be in Münster. If you want to have a real double degree, which we are working on, between University of Voronezh and University of Münster, then there is a restriction, sure. But to spend 1 or 2 semesters in Münster, there is no restriction as far as the number of students is concerned. So that is a normal application procedure which is quite informal. Then you are accepted as a guest student for 1 or 2 semesters, and you can participate in the lectures, you can write the exams, you get a degree for the exams as our students do, and it's a question of your home university how they accept these as part of the studies at Voronezh. But I learned that you are in favor of that as well, and there is a procedure that is in favor of you.
Подведем черту. Уважаемый профессор Беккер, спасибо вам большое. Для университета всегда очень большая честь, когда люди известные становятся почетными докторами университета. Ваш соотечественник, посол Германии, господин Ульрих Бранденбург, является почетным доктором Воронежского государственного университета и уже многократно приезжал сюда в университет. И не просто приезжал, вместе с ним приехала компания T-Systems. Он активно продвигает интересы университета, и мы просим быть вот таким ангелом-хранителем нашего университета в Германии. Еще раз благодарю вас, спасибо вам большое.
Thank you very, very much, and I can promise that's not at all the last time I'm here. I hope for many, many more visits here. I invite you to come to Münster, and I hope that's the beginning of a very strong relationship and a friendship between our 2 universities, and that we will have many, many activities on the student level, on the researcher level, on the professor level, on the teaching level, on the research project level in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.